My name is Jude Trader-Wolf. I am the speaker for the hour. Thank you for coming, for giving your lunch hour over on this beautiful day to this talk, and I really hope I make it worth your while. I'm coming here representing the Magellan Employees Assistance Program. That is, I know you have an internal Employees Assistance Program, and then there's Magellan, which has some of these other programs and various kinds of workshops and also free therapy for a number of sessions with some properly vetted therapists if you were interested in that. And just to give it a little shout out that EAPs are paid for by your employer, so it's a good thing to take advantage of them, which you're doing here today. And all the other services that they offer are on the website. So that's my pitch for the Employees Assistance Program, and thanks for coming. Today's topic is work-life balance. And I just want to start off the talk with a mention of a story. First of all, when you think about your work and your life, I mean, our heart and our mind are not separate. Our home life and our work life interweave in many, many ways, and who we are as a person, we don't leave necessarily parts of ourselves at home, although we're at work not necessarily thinking about them. But everything is really interconnected. And the better we understand those infrastructures of our own thinking, the better match we're going to have between how we use our energy and how we feel over the course of our life. And what we call a work-life fit is something that evolves and changes over the course of life. It's not a stable, static kind of thing. In our 20s, that work-life fit could be look very different than in your 40s. And so there's a skill set and a way of thinking about this that I hope to be able to share with you. And I think of it this way. If we could see the architecture of our minds or the architecture of our life, the way we see the architecture of our house, like when you walk in your door, what do you see? What kind of door do you have? You chose that door or you didn't choose that door and you moved into the house of someone else's house. And it's not necessarily your door, but it's okay. But you know what you walk in, what you see. You know what furniture is there. And you may sometimes think, there's a lot of stuff in the basement and I can't remember what it even is. Maybe we could bring a lamp up from there and put that over there, or you could move things around. But you could see it. You can see the changes you might want to make. And my niece is an interior designer, and I think of that magic because I wanted a bigger house, but I couldn't afford a bigger house about 6 years ago. So she came into my house, and she moved all my existing furniture around in different ways. And my piano is my main event because I'm a piano player. And she made the living room all about the piano, and I got more space, and I got a bigger house, and I didn't have to spend any money. She did it by moving things around and by getting rid of things that were really just sitting there, that were no longer fun, that were no longer relevant. And with technology, of course, you can get much smaller equipment, so it doesn't take up as much space either. But the architectures of our thinking are not always so, we just may not give it we're not aware of it necessarily. So what I want to talk to you about today are some ways to get more aware of the architectures of our thinking, some tools that you can take with you that are in the handout, and some books and things to think about that we could just cover in the course of an hour. Now, I'm wondering if, since you guys work here at Brookhaven Labs, you may be familiar with the World Science Festival. Anybody know about the World Science Festival in New York City coming up in the end of May? You ever been? Okay. Well, I highly recommend checking it out, the World Science Festival online. All kinds of interesting talks and productions and eminent, physicists and scientists talking about very interesting things. But one of the really fun things about the World Science Festival is something that they do one night of the festival. They have a storytelling slam. Anybody here familiar with The Moth podcast? Okay, it's a storytelling. You should check it out, definitely. It's online. Just go to themoth.org, and there's a podcast of storytelling shows where anybody can get up and tell a 5 to 6 minute story on a particular theme. The story has to be on the theme. The story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so the theme could be parenting, it could be deception, it could be cheating, it could be evil. It could be, it has to be on a theme and your take on that theme. And then the stories get judged, and somebody wins, and then those people go on to storytelling slams, and they have events. And they just got the MacArthur Grant. This is a pretty amazing organization, the Moth, in terms of bringing regular people up on stage, just anybody, they're not actors, telling stories. And there's something about it that's amazing and compelling and rich, and you should check it out. And the line is always around the corner if you ever go in the city. It's very hard. You have to get there very early. Anyway, the World Science Festival, they have scientists they have a storytelling slam, and one was a Nobel Prize winner, just telling the story about what it was like to get the call. One was a guy, well, I'm just going to get to the one that really matters. Richard Garriott, if you're familiar with this name, this is the first guy to go up in space, first civilian astronaut. And if you know anything of, he told his story, and in 2010 when I went to the Storytelling Slam at the World Science Festival. Now, his story was, he comes from a family of astronauts, and he lived on a block in a neighborhood where everybody was an astronaut, and everybody wanted to be an astronaut. And that's all he ever wanted to be, was an astronaut. That was his life, that was his world. But when he was 14 years old, a doctor told him he had an eye condition, and it just came out, his eyesight wasn't very good. And he went to get fitted for glasses, and the doctor said, you can never be an astronaut because you have this eye condition. They will never accept you as an astronaut. And at 14, he was told the thing he thought he would always do, he could not do. I'm telling you should listen to the podcast, but I'm condensing it quite a lot, and the richness of it is in his telling, but I have a point to make. So fast forward, he becomes a video game designer. And does this, he says, I can't go the traditional way into space. I'm going to find another way. I'm going to find another way into space. I'm going to buy a seat on some kind of space-going vehicle, and I'm going to space. And then he creates this video game company. He makes a lot of money, and then they tell him, you can't even go up with this eye condition, but you could go up if you have this very, very risky, odds are not so much with you, eye operation. If we can fix this eye problem, they would accept you as a civilian astronaut. Now that they were starting to be able to take these applications from people. What does he do? He gets the operation. The operation is successful. It spends, I think, I want to say it's $30 million, but I'm not sure it was. But it was many millions of dollars, and his company goes bankrupt. He's about to buy his seat, and this company goes big. It was in the 80s when there was a dip in this video game company. So the first obstacle was that you'll never go because of your eyes. The second one is you got to have this operation. Now he can go. He's clear to go. He doesn't have the money. He starts a new video game company, and in 2008 he did go up, and we had to go to the Soviets. He went to Russia for that, if you know about that. That story really energized me because when it comes to work-life fit, we don't always have the exact dream or the template of what it is we actually really want to do, or there could be something that prevents a health issue or some other issue that prevents us from actually, designing something that we fit exactly with. But he was an example of somebody who just kept going around those obstacles, and because his passion wasn't so much video games, but the video games were a means to an end. And all of the stories from these scientists were inspiring in a certain way, but that was a really fun one. And I wanted to share that with you because it fits with our theme of knowing what it is you want. And one more story, and then we'll just go forward with the PowerPoint, because a few years after 9/11, I was doing psychotherapy at that time. I'm not doing that anymore, but I was seeing a lot of people some people were involved in a lot of therapists that had treated people who survived the towers or had family members that they lost in the attacks and so forth. And so it was just a new problem that was very current and very alive, and we were all in it at the same time. We were therapists in a drama that everybody else was in at the same time. And we needed skills, and I went to a workshop called Facing Your Fears. And the first thing I didn't like about it was that it was called Facing Your Fears, but they called it a retreat. That just didn't fit. I thought that was odd. It was the first oxymoron. There were things that I got out of it, but the main thing that I got out of it was this. And it's an exercise that you might want to do. It's not in the PowerPoint, but it's an exercise you might want to do. The first thing was, to just sit down with a big pad of paper and make a list of all the things you fear. I fear, and I'll tell you what my list was because it's part of the story. I fear heights. I fear things. I fear physical danger. I fear moving fast. I fear things on my feet that make me move. And I don't like chickens because I grew up on a farm and my brothers used to throw chickens at me. So now I'm afraid of chickens, but I don't know which came first. Sorry, I just had to say that. All these fears. Then we were supposed to see if there was a pattern, see if you could see a pattern in all these fears that just come to your mind if you don't edit them. And the pattern was physical threats for me, was physical. Oh, also fear of being in a terrorist attack was one of them. That was kind of on the list at that point, to find a theme and then pick one of those fears and create find an anecdote or a story from your life and then share that with one other person in the workshop. And so we would talk to each other, and then we would take it from there. So I picked, I don't remember what mine was. I picked when my niece begged me to go rollerblading with her, and I wanted to please her, and she begged me, and she said, it's going to be okay, you can do it. And I knew I would hate it, but I wanted to make her happy. So I put on the rollerblades, and I tried, and I said, look, after an hour, I said, this is not for me. I'm just sick of bumping into everything. And she said, you'd probably like it better if you went outside. And I knew that was probably true, but I just wasn't ready. But that was as far as I got with rollerblading. So I'm about to tell this other woman this story, and she tells me her story. Her fears, her theme was that she had a dread and a fear that people were talking about her in a negative way when she wasn't around, saying things about her they would never say to her face. And that she thought about this a lot, and she had this constant fear and dread that people would say things that they would never tell her, so she couldn't fix it. They would never tell her what they really didn't like about her, so she couldn't make it right, but that they would be nice to her face and say this behind her back, and that she really thought about this a lot, and so she tried to please everybody all the time. So the theme that she could see was approval, applause and approval she really needed. And this was her threat, a great sense of threat. So then the facilitator, here's a room of like 200 people. The facilitator says, you can get up into speak in the microphone and share your story and your fear if you like. And she tried to be helpful to each of these people. And then there was more that came of it about getting to what you want, which is which is in the PowerPoint. So she goes to the mic and she says exactly what I just said to 200 people in this, and she's unabashedly saying, I have this dread and this fear that people are thinking these things about me, and they will never tell me to my face, and I won't be able to fix it, but I secretly won't know that they really don't like me, so I have to work all the time to be so nice and so good, because I don't know what they're saying or when they're saying it, and they're being two-faced and so on. And the facilitator very gently and reassuringly says, okay, I can understand your concern about that, but most people aren't really thinking about you, they're thinking about themselves. Most of the time, people are just as worried about themselves as you are and they're really thinking about how they're doing. That most people are really not thinking about you at all. They're really worried about how they're doing. So she sits down, people sort of, yeah, well, okay, that really kind of registered for me. She gets back in the line, goes back up there about a half hour later after a bunch of other people went. She said, I have to change my answer. My worst fear is that no one is thinking about me. And that was the truth. That was the deepest truth that she got to. That was her worst. It was worse to think that no one was thinking about her. Out of our fears and resentments, and this is what we're going to, often getting a work-life, what's the word, fit. If we can't achieve it, or know what exactly that looks like, we might get that by recognizing what we fear and what we resent and what wants are connected to those fears and those wants. So for me, I realized that my fear of physical danger, my fear of physical threat, was directly at odds with certain things I wanted to do. Sounds strange, like skiing. I wanted to ski, and I don't like things on my feet that make me go, and I don't like heights. And so how am I going to get up there? So there's always a tension. And it's an aliveness and a dynamic tension between what we really desire and what fears may be associated with that. So we could shut it down. We could put it in the basement. We could say, I really don't think about it anymore because I can't get past that tension. But there is a way. Now with skiing, what's the way? Go to ski school. Get some skills. It's not easy, and I wasn't very successful at it, but I did get over the fear of doing it. I never really enjoyed it, but I learned a lot. I learned about having mastery over my body. And so that's an example of what we want to get at in terms of there are going to be some hidden structures in our thinking that are not so easily recognized, but we can get at them through some of these exercises. But a work-life fit overall, the concept, refers to having the best possible match between our preferences, our interests, and our values, and the people, activities, and work responsibilities that receive our time and our attention and our energy. So just like when you walk into your house, if you see things that you really like and they're a match for you, the architecture of your house is a match for who you are, your life is going to feel better. It's going to feel more streamlined. It's going to feel like a connection between many different parts of yourself. And when that isn't the case, when the architecture of our house doesn't match or the architecture of our lives doesn't match, we feel it. There are reasons why we don't always respond to it. I'll get to that in a minute. I mean, we may not be fully aware of it. It could be we need to make ourselves aware of it. So work-life balance is not exactly the same concept as work-life fit. Work-life balance refers more to I spend as much time with my family as I do at work, or I have as much community involvement as I feel I need, or I spend too much time commuting and not enough time in my community, so I want to somehow resolve that. Like the balance of your time is, that's what balance refers to time and space. Fit is more about how we think about our lives. It's more like how Richard Garriott didn't really get the template of his life that he really wanted, but he found a way to achieve some version of that, and that in the process of achieving that, we create life satisfaction. It's more in the process of creating it and the ways that we may change our thinking or change our lives that we can actually achieve ongoing. It's not necessarily the end game is what I mean, it's the process. Work-life fit is directly related to health and wellness. I'm just going to read a little study here, and some of it's in the PowerPoint. But there's a lot of studies about stress and stress resilience, and there was a powerful study done at a big corporation in Chicago and was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. And it became like a touchstone for understanding life satisfaction. And this study found that the 4 key components of life satisfaction, the 4 most important needs that need to be met where people achieve what we call life satisfaction, have nothing to do with money, and they have nothing to do with luxury. They don't even really have to do with status. They have to do with 4 things. One is competence, that I have a sense that I have mastery in my life, and I can move towards something that I want. Autonomy, which is independent-mindedness, of course, and independent-mindedness and a personal sense of agility. I can move if I need to move. I can get out of a situation that I don't want, and I can think for myself. Relatedness, some powerful, deep connections with other people, casual connections with other people, a mix, the richest and healthiest, the healthiest mix is a diversity of relationships, where we use different parts of ourselves and different levels of relationship. That creates the greatest sense of health. And the last is, of course, self-worth. Self-worth isn't something that we start out with. Self-worth is something that we realize through going after the things we really want. And sometimes you have to face your fears to do that. So we're going to look at some tools, and then I'll tell you about some resources. So goodness of fit between professional and personal life occurs in the architectures of our own thinking. And those structures that align our strengths, values, and preferences with day-to-day activity. I know you guys are busy and you probably have intense schedules and projects that are due and deadlines and all kinds of commitments. The challenge is to be able to separate out what the world wants from you, to really look at what does the world want from you, what's the architecture of my own survival that the world is creating for me, or the world that I'm in, and what are my internal structures in response to that, and to try to find the best match that you possibly can between them. Well, what we find is that if you can find meaning in what you're doing, I know scientists, often are driven, internally motivated people, and working in a something that matters to you, whatever the role may be, that lends itself to life satisfaction, and much more important to health, in fact, because it gives you a resilience, kind of Teflonizes your response to stress. You know how Teflon things slide off, and a regular big old frying pan, if you fry something in it, no matter how much oil you use, you got to really scrub it. You got to really clean that thing. Well, finding meaning in what we do is one of those Teflonizing kinds of internal structures that even if something is difficult, even if something has many challenges to it, the stress, we'll be able to engage with it in a way that's creative, and it makes the stress something interesting. It doesn't mean it's easy. It's not about that. And it's not about, it's more about it matters, and it has meaning for me, and it challenges my brain and engages my brain in a way that I will get around whatever obstacles show up, is part of what we call that Teflonizing of our stress response. Pleasure-seeking behaviors, just like money like people would often think that if I had a lot more money, if I won the lottery, then I would be able to do what I really want. Then I'm going to have it. And that's not really what the research shows, and it's not really, we could have it by the way we think about our lives. And pleasure-seeking behaviors actually don't make people happier in terms of life satisfaction. They may create many, many moments of fun. I'm not saying it isn't going to be fun, to take the trips you want to take and do those kinds of things. But we're talking about something just a little deeper and more a way to live day to day. So research that was, this was published in the journal Emotion. There's a whole body of work these people are doing. The main researcher's name is Barbara Fredrickson. If you Googled her, you'd see many, many studies that she is involved with. It's called the Broaden and Build Theory of Positive Psychology. Positive psychology seeks to build on our strengths rather than to kind of fix what's wrong. It's a school of thinking that's about maybe 20 years old. It's gaining some traction. They're actually using it in the Veterans Administration right now to train soldiers. It's an experiment, but they're using it. You're using the broaden and build theory of positive psychology to try to build up stress resilience in soldiers before they go into high combat and high stress situations, and then to see if this helps to prevent post-traumatic stress by inculcating this way of thinking. So it's really out there. Now, Barbara Fredrickson talks about the broaden and build theory, and which says that in the moment, positive emotions that form the link, that it is in the moment positive emotions, doing something I really love, being with somebody I really like, being excited, going to taking a wonderful walk, but thinking about those kinds of things. But in the moment, positive emotions form the link between happiness and desirable life outcomes. And the reason they believe this happens is that when you engage in activities that bring out positive emotions, particularly love, joy, contentment, creativity. If you can call creativity an emotion, I don't know, what would the word be? Engagement, full engagement with something that is compelling and really interesting. If your brain is engaged, joy, love, contentment is something to work towards. And that the fact is, what the theory says, and if you read the studies, it says that the more we do, it's like the building blocks of a happy life. They become the touchstones of where our memories go. They become the touchstones of what we think about when we think about who we are, rather than negative things, painful things, or what can very easily happen, which is just a stream of thoughts that we're not really in control of. And we all have that. It could be from the news. It could be from just listening. If we don't really focus our minds, and we're going to get to that in another slide, if we don't really take some effort to focus, and I do it all the time. I could listen, if I have the wrong radio station on, it could just ruin my day. It could really just take me out of any kind of sense of peace or contentment at all and say, the world has gone crazy. This is insane. How is this person famous? I don't get it. And there's nothing I could do about that. There's nothing I could do about that except turn it off. Don't listen. But it could it could get in there if I'm feeling stressed, anxious, tired. And then I would start saying, well, where are you in your life? I mean, what are you so special? You get to go to Brookhaven Labs and give a talk, and who do you think you are? It's not nice. It's not a nice voice in there. And that's, depending how shaky I feel or how well prepared I am or what else happened, it's there. It's just kind of a little, like a psychological ambush, right? And stress definitely can bring up this kind of running inner dialogue of, oh, this is never going to work out. Who do you think you are anyway? Nice try. Oh, sorry. Or just a river of kind of negativity, and that it's like muddy waters. It's very, very tough to get the energy to feel good about life. So it takes some self-discipline to recognize the call is coming from inside the house. I'm doing that to myself. It may be a habit to do it to myself. Some of where mine comes from, I will freely say, I came from an almost fundamentalist family out in the Midwest. We were raised according to the 3 R's, really, really religious. And it was Catholic religious, very, very religious Catholic. We went to Mass 7 days a week. So we had to be very, very good, and we had to be very quiet, and we had to be perfect. I mean, really all the time. So that does produce, there's a lot of pressure, it does produce an ongoing, that you're not doing that right. That's not, no, like more of a no than a yes. So to train your mind, if you have any kind of background like that, it's there. It's just kind of waiting there for you to make a mistake or just not show up in just the right way. And yet there are tools that you can use to get that out of the basement. I think of that as being in the basement of my house, packed away somewhere, and something just opens it up, like a door that just opens. And now I'm used to it, so I know what to do about it, but that's why I'm saying to you, there are ways to get around that, or else it's paralysis. It'll tell you, what's the point? Why bother? Why try? But resilience to stress is enhanced by the relation between positive emotions and increased life satisfaction. Because the idea is that happy people become more satisfied not because they feel better, but because they develop these tools and techniques and ways of thinking for living well. It doesn't mean you won't get ambushed by negativity. The call could be coming from inside the house, or it could be something that happens at work that's stressful or whatever. But because we work at developing resources for living well, we know how to do it, and that's the competence. The autonomy is I know what I need. The competence is I can achieve that. I can find that for myself. I can make that happen. I'm going to get around those obstacles. And so there's a whole body of work about this that I think is a wonderful thing, rather than thinking of people as broken that need to be fixed, but thinking of people that have latent strengths, perhaps. Strengths that just, psychological muscles that make us feel like we can really do it. I can do it. Now, this is just, in fact, if you want to read a fun read, is in Business Week of April 13th, which was last week. No, what's today, the 25th? It was almost 2 weeks ago, but is the how-to issue of Business Week. And it's many, many pages of like how to fire someone, or how to give your opinion, or how to write an op-ed, or they're all and one of them was a Google executive wrote about how to avoid burnout, and it's directly related to what we're talking about. And so she said, avoiding burnout isn't about getting 3 square meals or 8 hours of sleep. And you know, Google has its own, anybody ever been to Google or worked with anybody from Google? I don't know what their culture is in that company in terms of their demands, but it's not even necessarily about getting time at home. I have a theory that burnout is about resentment. And you beat it by knowing what it is you're giving up that makes you resentful. I tell people, find your rhythm. Your rhythm is what matters to you so much that when you miss it, you're resentful of your work. So an example that you can read the piece, but the example she uses is she's mentoring somebody in the program who is a high achiever, but he just doesn't have it. He just doesn't have the energy. He's not feeling it, and it shows. And they talk it out, and he said that every Monday night, since he was a little kid and he lived in this community where his parents also lived and he had a couple of kids, on Monday night, they would go to this Italian restaurant for pasta night, and it was $5 for as much pasta as you could eat on pasta night. And his parents went, his wife went, his neighbors went. He stopped going. He stopped going because he was so busy at work. It's a small thing, but he missed that. And she said, from now on, you will always go to pasta night. You will never miss pasta night or anything like pasta night. But that was a very specific thing that he was giving up, and he wasn't aware of it. He wasn't aware that because he was giving it up, he wasn't happy. He wasn't feeling that connection. And it was something, it made him feel more resentful of his work, and he was able to make a small move that made a large difference. Finding your rhythm is a self-awareness piece. Now, there's this list of strengths from a book called Strengths Finder that I think is in this handout. That's something for you to think about on your own. But I would look at that list. Well, no, let me get to the next slide. So when you find your rhythm, you protect it. You can't have everything you want, but you can have the things that really matter. And thinking that way empowers you to work really hard for a really long period of time. It's more in how we think about it and how we really protect those things that we've decided are deal breakers. Just a quick example, because I have my own story on this, but that I was in private practice for a long time. But I also really, really like doing scary things like coming and doing talks like this. But I really like preparing these talks and researching things and talking about sort of the larger issues. And I had been a therapist for 25 years. Now, I kept turning down talks that if I had to travel or if I had to leave the office, which was almost all of them. A lot of them were in the city or out here. And so I was turning down things that I really wanted to do that weren't a daily occurrence, because to meet the needs of my clients, and I had to make that choice. And I was starting to really be unhappy, and I started getting bronchitis a lot, and that's when I know that I'm getting stressed out. Well, when I really looked at what do I really want, I thought, what I want is I want freedom. I want the freedom to be able to go and do these talks, and so I have to give up my practice. It's one or the other. This is not something that this divide cannot be bridged. Now, once I got that and I took care of it, it was pretty freaky, I have to say. I did not know if I would get enough work to make it worth my while. But the resentment was enough that I realized I'm done. Like, I'm done doing this. If my practice was a kid, they would be grown and gone and in college. And it was time to do something different. Now, and it was a risk, and I'm very, very glad I took that risk. And I'm not saying that it wasn't without some internal pressure and fear. But every time my husband would say, we're in a practice together, he'd say, I have a client that you could see, and you would love her, and they'll pay privately, and it would just be 1 hour, a couple hours a week, and it would just pull me like, I could do that. That would be a sure thing. I could do that. And he'd say, just a couple hours a week. And I said no to every one of them because I had said no to that, and I wanted to protect this boundary. And he was just trying to help me out. He was like, you're worried, you're scared about if you're not going to make money. This is just a way, you can do this. And I said, no, I don't want to be there. And so nobody wants to go to a therapist that doesn't really want to be there. Even though I could do the job, you don't want to go to, I'm just too honest as a person. Not that they would ever know, but I would know. I don't really want to be here. And so many times, the other night, he said, it would be so easy for you. She's so great. It'd be a great match. But I have to say no to them because I'm protecting this rhythm. And I'm liking it. And I'm liking the freedom. And I'm liking the creative freedom. But there'll always be these pulls, And and if it's sort of, you have maybe the opposite problem in a way, in that I'm a freelancer and always have been. You're in a big organization where there are pulls and responsibilities. And some of them you may volunteer for, and some of them you may get talked into, and some of them you may do to be nice, and so no one's saying things about when you're not around and you don't know what they are, so you don't have to be afraid about that. But just to figure out for yourself what's my rhythm, and protect it. This rhythm wouldn't have been appropriate for me in my 20s at all. I needed security. I wanted that. It was different in my 30s. It changes over time, and if you're aware of yourself, then you can follow it, you can find it, and you can protect it. And that's what really the burnout prevention is really all about. This is just a great quote from Martha Graham. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. You have to keep yourself open and aware to the urges that motivate you. Keep the channel open. How do we do that? Well, one way is to know what your fears are, for example, and the fears will always take you to the want. Like, I want to be safe. I want to not be in physical danger. Well, that's an illusion, right? You have to take that a step further. For instance, if that were what your want was, that's a very fundamental one. How can I live with a want that I can't actually control? Well, I can get as much physical skill, as much sense of competence, as much sense of mastery as possible. I can really work at that. And here's the magic of it is, by working at that, the fear you can live with. You can live with the tension of not knowing whether that will ever happen, whether you ever will be in this physical danger. But knowing what it could be something, a want, a fear that you want to be a musician, you want to be a painter, you want to climb a mountain, you want to go to the Arctic, you want to do something that's just really out there. You might want that and fear that, and in that tension, make a list of steps that would resolve that tension. That's an exercise you can do. Now, this list of, that might be the next slide. Well, to focus on what you want as opposed to what we don't want. Now, we really do have a habit of thinking, I don't want that. I don't want to go there. Oh my God, I don't want, instead of thinking, I want the trains to run on time, we'll think, I don't want to get trapped in the tunnel. Now, we don't control the trains, but we can control our thinking about things like that. Now, this is a book I would recommend if you're interested in this whole concept of matching the architectures of your thinking, discovering them, and transforming them to match the architectures, the physical architectures of the roles of your life. It's a book called Seeing Red Cars. The author is Laura Goodrich. She's a corporate trainer and has a rather expensive program online. If you wanted to buy it, it's like $600 if you want to get the CD and the whole thing that you can kind of do on your own. But the book is a very good book about the power of focus. Now, are you guys familiar with the Harvard study about the gorilla costume? Do you know about this study about it? Okay, I'll tell it very briefly. The study was done at Harvard University. They asked groups of students, two groups, to be two different teams, like the yellow team and the red team. And they had other students that were observers. Now, the observers were told that the red team and the yellow team are going to play basketball, and you're going to count the number of passes. This group is going to count the number of passes that the yellow team makes. This group's going to count the number of passes that the red team makes, and at the end you would tally up the number of passes that your team that you're watching would make. And they're filming this entire event. At the end of the event, they ask for the number of passes, and they tally it up, and they ask the observers, what else did you see? What else did you notice in the activity? And they didn't know what they were talking about. And then they showed them the film. Now, during this game, a woman in a gorilla costume, or a guy, walked through the game, looked at the camera and went like this. Oh, sorry. Waved to the camera a couple of times. A person in a gorilla costume. 46% of the people observing did not see it. They didn't see it. And there were a high percentage of them that said they did not believe it until they saw the film. They refused to believe it. They were so focused. And you think you're seeing what you're seeing, but we're seeing what we are choosing to focus on or what we've been trained to focus on. What we're used to focusing on or what we've been told is important. That's what advertising is about. You know, focus, it trains our mind to focus on a particular theme or idea. And it's just an interesting story about the power of attention and the power of our minds will just conveniently screen out what we have perceived to be unimportant or we've been told is unimportant. So when it comes to this, the architectures of our thinking, I was definitely told that it was important to be very good and very perfect and always get it right, say, for example. So there's a lot of scripts that go with that. And so to focus on getting it right and being perfect and to have a focus on that is kind of paralyzing and upsetting, and you do a lot of beating yourself up a lot of the time. So to change that, and I wasn't aware of it, just like you're just not aware of what you're not aware of. You're aware of how your focus has been told. But experience teaches us about what feels good or bad, what works, what doesn't work, who is likely to hurt or reward us. We have life experiences, and it teaches us this. But without some examination and self-awareness, experiences can train us to focus on what we don't want and what does not work and who we need to avoid, more than it will train us to focus on what we do want, who we want to be around, and what does work. Anyway, this book goes into this in a lot more depth, and it has a lot of good exercises if you're interested in checking out some of, and that the Strengths Finders list. Now, those strengths are a way, kind of a template to understand our own, where we're coming from, and to know if, well, I'll give you an exercise for that in a minute. But the objective is to change ingrained mental habits of focusing on what we don't want, which leads to paralysis and inaction. Because it could be saying, I don't want to fall down off a mountain, but I do want to gain expertise, or at least gain the confidence to ski. And we have to find some middle ground for that. We have to focus on something that we do want, which is I want skills so that I can feel competent. I don't want to fail because I want to keep advancing in my career, or I don't want to spend time with draining people becomes I want to be in energizing relationships with people that I enjoy. That gives us a direction. That gives us a focus. That gives us a way to go. Seeing red cars, she tells, there's some research studies she shares, but that just like the gorilla study, if we're saying, I don't want to spend time with draining people, I'm just so sick of these gossipy people, I'm so sick of it, or if we're thinking that, the idea is we're going to be drawn to noticing it, which reinforces the crummy feeling. Whereas if we train ourselves to say, it means a lot to me to be with, empowering, supportive people. I really like people like that. I like people who like their lives. I like people who love life. I like people who are interesting and creative. And I notice them. Then you begin to notice them. If you're missing someone, if you have a kid in the military, say, you notice everybody. You notice every soldier everywhere. You notice them because this is where your focus is drawn to. That's not a bad thing. It's just part of your life. But we can train ourselves to say what it is we do want to focus on. That's what this whole idea is about. You can, I think in the handout there's these circles where you can say, like this just gives some areas of life, intellectual development, physical health, relationships, professional development, things that take time, energy, and resources, correct? And if you wanted to, you could piece this out and say, wow, I spend a lot of time on intellectual development and very little time on physical. You could make the pie chart, like how big a slice of the pie is each of these areas of life, and really look at that. And is that working out? It's a self-awareness tool. This wheel. Now, this is the 34 themes, and I'm not going to read them all. They're obviously right there in front of you. But the purpose of it is to look at them and really think about them. What, if you were even to assign a numerical value with 0 to 10, how much does this describe me? That I'm an achiever. I constantly seek achievement. Or I always want to know, when do we start? I want to get going. I like to start new things. How adaptive am I? And so on and so forth. How much, if you look at all 34 of them, and you gave each of them a numerical value, and then go back over it and see what are the high numbers, and then look for a pattern. What does this say about me? There's something about your preferences. It's going to tell you about your values. It's going to tell you about what you do well. And that's a way to examine, am I really in roles and involvements and engagements in life that reflect that? And how can I express those parts of myself in the template of my life as it already is? Those are choices that we can learn to make. Any thoughts about this one? There's 3 more. They're all on these slides, but we don't really think they're self-explanatory. Which brings us to, if you're familiar with the Tolstoy short story, try to say that 3 times real fast. Tolstoy's short story, The 3 Questions. Do you know this story? Well, there was a king, and I think you should definitely, it's online, free, you can read it, but I want to share this. I'll read the first paragraph of the story, and then we'll talk about it in a minute. It once occurred to a certain king that if he always knew the right time to begin everything, if he knew who were the right people to listen to and whom to avoid, and above all, if he always knew what was the most important thing to do, he would never fail in anything he might undertake. And he called everybody into his kingdom, all of his experts, to say, I want to know what is the right time to do I want to get this right. I want to know the right time to do things. I want to know who are the most important people for me to be with. And I want to know what I should do when I'm with these people. What should I do? So, there was scientists said they were going to study the problem scientifically, and then some people, spiritualists, said you need, the magician should come and answer the question for you. He wasn't happy with any of the answers. And I'm going to ruin the story for you, but I think you should read it because Tolstoy says it much better than I am. But I want to make the point that he decides to go to see this hermit who lives at the top of this mountain. Who's supposedly a wise man and has the answer, he believes. And he disguises himself so the hermit won't know that he's the emperor, and leaves his men, his protectors, at the bottom of the mountain. And he climbs up the mountain, and he sees the hermit digging in a garden. The hermit is digging and working very hard, and he's an old man, the hermit. And the king says, excuse me, I'd really like to talk to you. I have some questions. And the hermit says, sit down. Okay, doesn't say much. Keeps digging, digging, digging. He's really laboring. So the king says, well, let me help you with that. I'll help you. I want to ask you some questions. Let me help you with that. So he starts digging, and then he says to the hermit, you sit down. I'll do this. I'm much younger than you. Let me do it. So he's digging in the garden. He spends the afternoon with them until the sun goes down. And the hermit says, well, you might as well just stay the night because you helped me so much. Thank you. And the guy says, well, I have some questions. I really have these questions I want you to answer for me. And the hermit says, well, okay, we'll get to that. Now, a man suddenly comes running out of the woods, bleeding from a huge gash in his stomach. And the king rushes over to this man and the hermit. They go to him. He uses his own cloak to bind the wound, to soak up his blood. And the hermit helps him, and the man in the morning is alive, and he survives. And he looks over at the king, the man does, and the king says to the hermit, I still have these questions that I want you to answer for me. And the hermit says, okay, in a minute, and the man who ran through the woods said, you don't know me, you don't recognize me, And the king said, no. And he said, I'm your enemy. You killed my brother and you stole our land, and I came here to kill you. But I saw your men saw me at the bottom of the mountain. They saw me climb up the mountain, and they stabbed me. So when I got to the top of the mountain, you saved my life. I came here to kill you, and you saved my life. And the king was shocked, and the hermit said, you see, if you hadn't helped me in the garden, if you hadn't stayed and helped me, being an old man, helped me in the garden, you would have been attacked by this man. You might be dead. You've been attacked by this man. But because you helped me, you were safe. Because you were here when he got stabbed, you saved his life. And the answer to the three questions, and the king gave him back his land, and he said, I'm very sorry. I feel like a different person. I'm sorry I killed your brother and took your land, and he feels forgiveness between them. And the hermit says, you see, the most important time is now. If you hadn't helped me when I needed help, you would have left and you would have been assaulted at the bottom of the mountain. And the most important person when I was digging in the garden was me, and you helped me. And the most important person when the guy ran out of the woods was this man. So the most important person is the person that you're with. And sometimes that person is you. You spend a lot of time alone. Sometimes that person is you. And the most important thing to do is to help that person. That's the answer to Tolstoy's three questions. And I think the story speaks to, look, we're all kind of the emperor of our own life. That's a good way to think about it anyway. You are this one unique person in this one unique life. There's only ever going to be this one you. You have strengths and you have gifts and you have talents and you deserve to be happy. And in order to find that happiness, in order to create that happiness, it's kind of like the king going in secret and not knowing that what he was actually going to find was that it's always now. There's always someone I'm with, and there's always a way that I can serve this person, or I can, and I'm saying sometimes that person is you. Don't ever forget that. But read the story. He says it much better than I do. So very briefly, these top 10 ways to achieve is to think of yourself as a whole person, to try to get your roles to have a kind of a gestalt, and to think of all of your physical, emotional, psychological, social, and spiritual needs. Talk nicely to yourself when you're the only person with yourself. Be nice to that person. Hang out with positive people. Be conscious. You can be conscious of your wants and be conscious of your strengths and be conscious of your fears. Be conscious of the people that you value. That consciousness changes everything. Stay connected. Of course, we have to take responsibility for our own happiness and for the architectures of our thinking. Some of them are habits, and we have to take responsibility for changing them because nobody else, I'm saying the call is coming from inside the house, and nobody else can get in there. We have to do it ourselves. That's when we have to be independent. Do make time for yourself. Do not worry about perfection, and have fun. Think holistically. Well, we just went through these, so I don't think we just went through those. And these are some references. The Strengths Finders is a 2.0. Expands on that list and how to use that and some tools. The Seeing Red Cars and some of these other, the Center for Creative Leadership and so on. Questions, comments, thoughts? Observations, reflections? Anybody? Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Mindfulness is another way of saying that. Is another way of describing this this concept. Yeah. If you're familiar with the concept of mindfulness, there's some great books on that. Any other thoughts? Questions?